Will you inform me when we achieve quorum?
Yes, we have. Yes, we have a quorum now.
Thank you very much and welcome everyone to the Monday, May 16th, 2022 East Bay Community Energy Community Advisory Committee meeting. Will the clerk please call roll?
Yes. I would also like to read out a statement about AB 361. This Community Advisory Committee meeting is being conducted pursuant to the provisions of the Brown Act to facilitate teleconferencing and to reduce the risk of COVID-19 transmission at public meetings. Ordinarily, the Brown Act sets strict rules for teleconferencing. AB 361 suspends some of those rules during a state of emergency where the state or local health officials have the Brown Act continues to require that we notice meetings in advance and allow the public to participate. The Community Action Committee has met all of the applicable notice requirements, and the public is welcome to participate in this meeting. If you wish to be recognized during public comment, please fill out a public comment speaker form found at ebce.org/meetings and use the raise hand feature in Zoom. You'll be recognized for 3 minutes. Comments can also be submitted online at ebce.org/meetings. And with that, I will start. I will take roll. Member Landry.
Present.
Thank you. Member Frank. Member Lou.
Present.
Member Frank is excused.
Oh, yes, thank you. Member Swaminathan. Member Swaminathan. Member Lakshmi.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. Member Talria. Member Talria. Member Pacheco. Member Pacheco.
Member Pacheco is also excused. He gave us notice earlier in the week.
Okay, hold on 1 second. Okay. Member Sutter.
Present.
Thank you. Member Hernandez.
Present. Thank you.
Thanks. A member Lutz.
I'm here.
Vice Chair Mutzenberg. Thank you.
Here.
And Chair Eldred.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, everyone. The first item that we're going to go into is for public comment, and this is a reminder that public comment is reserved for persons wishing to address the committee on any EBCE related matters that are not otherwise on this meeting's agenda. Public comments on matters listed on the agenda shall be heard at the time the matter is called. As with all public comment, members of the public who wish to address the committee are customarily limited to 3 minutes per speaker and must complete an electronic speaker slip. The committee chair may increase or decrease the time allotted to each speaker. Have we received any written comment prior to 5 p.m. yesterday, or are there any members of the public with their hands raised?
Yes, we have 2 speakers with their hands raised. Blair Beekman and Tom Kelly. And I would also like to recognize that Member Swaminathan has joined the meeting. So with that, I will recognize Mr. Beekman for 3 minutes. 1 second.
She, her.
Thank you. Blair Beekman, you are recognized for 3 minutes. Okay. I think while Blair Beekman gets her
this year's snowpack has little chance of reaching.
Let me go ahead and recognize
Hi, this is Blair.
For the city of Bakersfield's Department of
Yeah.
Water.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, it's Blair. Hi.
Yes, yes, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Can you hear me without this noise?
Industry's water storage districts.
There is
I
a
can hear
considerable
you.
amount of background noise, Blair. If there's a way to move away or
Come
turn
back
that
to me
down.
in 5 seconds.
Since the implementation.
You bet. Why don't we take Tom Kelly first?
Great, thank you.
Any testing or data needed to expedite the removal.
Blair, can you mute your side again, please? Thank you.
Great. Tom Kelly, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you. I want to just address the issue of EBCE's generation rates. For those of you who are on this committee, and there are a couple, I'm thinking of Ernie and perhaps Cynthia, who've been here from the outset of EBCE's formation. The rates that were set were always intended to be based on a relationship with PG&E's generation rates. So when we started out, it was a 2% discount to PG&E's generation rate. It went to 1.5%, and currently it's at 1%. If you now look at the posted generation rates on EBCE's website, you will find that the generation rate for EBCE's Bright Choice is actually 3.5% higher than PG&E. Why is that? Well, I don't know. Perhaps you've been advised or counseled by the staff as to why that is. But in trying to dig into that, I found that what apparently has happened is that PG&E is now enabled to charge a PCIA charge to its bundled customers. It now shows up in the rate comparisons. And what's interesting is that the PG&E PCIA charge is actually higher than the one charged to EBCE customers. So when you add those two rates together, you actually get the 1% discount that EBCE promises its Bright Choice customers. But here's the thing. If you actually apply the discount to the generation rates, which is what the EBCE board has advised or required, the combination of the EBCE generation rate and PCIA actually winds up being less than what is shown in the analysis on the website. What that means is that EBCE customers are being overcharged for EBCE's electricity, which I'll remind you is dirtier by 3.5 times PG&E's current generation. So what's going on? As a CAC, can you request that an analysis be done of EBCE's generation rates and explain to all of us why the generation rate is 3.5 times or 3.5% greater than PG&E? Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And actually, I just want to apologize. We were trying to connect after last meeting and I got quite ill. And I'm sorry that fell off. So why don't we circle back, and if you could help do a write-up of that, which I'm sure you have, I will make sure to pass that on also at the next meeting. So thank you for that comment.
Great, thank you. Blair Beekman, you're recognized.
And actually, I believe, Nick, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, sure thing. So Tom is pointing to our joint rate mailer, which shows the comparison of our rates to those of PG&E. And is kind of representing something that is not, I think, entirely accurate. So we set our rates such that our customers pay, the generation rate plus the PCIA, for all customers is 1% less than the generation rate plus the PCIA that PG&E sets. Every year, the PG&E sets a different, slightly different PCIA. It's based on a vintage. So 2017 is different than 2018, is different than 2019, is different than 2020. The current PCIA that is listed for PG&E customers is the 2021 vintage. To ensure that all of our customers, because we experience that same 1% discount, even though they have different PCIAs. So for instance, customers from the city of Tracy are 2019 or 2020 vintage, and most of our customers are 2018 vintage. They're going to have slightly different PCIAs. So we adjust our generation rates slightly between vintages to ensure that that generation rate plus the PCIA is always 1%. So in this particular example, because the PCIA 2018 vintage PCIA, which is the one we list on our website, is lower than the 2021 vintage PCIA, the result is that the generation rate is a little bit higher, such that those two numbers always equal 1%. So I hope that helps clarify that indeed we are at all times and have always offered our customers the stated value proposition.
Thank you, Nick. That was really helpful. I do remember when you brought this to the boards and let us know that we would be at times offering greater than 1%, so that some customers would be experiencing higher than 1%, but that all of them would be doing it that way. That was a really helpful response. All right, Blair, how's your background noise doing?
Hi, Blair Beekman here. I fixed it. Thank you. Thanks for your patience. Blair Beekman here. Happy May to everyone. I guess it was maybe last month, the month before, interesting public comment time. Some new questions coming to yourselves. Thank you for attempting to answer some of those questions here now. It's a learning process for me, and I need the learning. So thank you. I've had, I'm totally, naive and try to come in really nice about the future of the importance of renewables, local procurement of renewables, and what that can mean for our future at this time. I was pretty surprised what actually entails those renewables. I mean, things are new to me. And so it's a learning process for myself. And I patiently am trying to wait this out, because I've had to balance for the past month that I fear nuclear. I accept the ideas of its clean energy, carbon energy concepts, but it's at such a high price that I worry and it's many factors of what can make it such a high price. So I hope I can be talked more exactly what will be our renewable future. What exactly will we be counting on the fossil fuel industry, the frac fuel industry, to help with this renewable future? To make that clear, it's important. I mean, it's a tough conversation, but I think we have to make those choices if we really want to say no to a future of nuclear. And it takes a lot of concerted effort that we do that. I think we're just learning how to do that. Good luck how we can have those open conversations about it and trusting conversations. A reminder that, way back in October 2020, IPR reports were stating that 2023 was going to be a year of plateaued solar power use, that we weren't going to be continuously on the rise with solar and storage issues. I really questioned why was that the case way back when? And you guys made some adjustments at the time that were interesting and helpful, and really addressed that no matter what our future is, if we work towards a renewable future, we can really work to make it a certain goal of making renewables first and not fossil fuels. That's an important distinction to have. And you guys really work towards those things. I still don't know what's going to be up in 2023, what to expect. I hope you can be willing to want to make that clear. And good luck how we can make distinctions between really important solar power ideas and cheesy fossil fuel. Thank you.
Thank you, Blair. So seeing no other members of the public with their hand raised, I will move to approval of minutes from April 18th, 2022. Is there any, has there been any public comment submitted on this item, or are there any members of the public with their hands raised who wish to discuss the minutes?
There have been no public comments with regards to this item, although I do see a hand raised. Oh, well, some Blair Beekman, let me lower the hand. There are no comments for this item.
Excellent. Then Jim, I see you have a comment.
Yeah, the minutes at the last meeting have a couple things being asked to be placed on the May meeting, this meeting.
Just as a clarifier, Jim, it is a request to be placed on a future agenda meeting, not the next one. We would never actually be able to respond to anything from the board. So we are working, we actually have a meeting with Adrian on Wednesday to make sure that the items get agendized, and one of them is showing up this evening. So yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
well then you should change the minutes to read future meeting, not May 2022 meeting.
Great. That we will definitely, Adrian, if you can make that
Yes.
adjustment, even when folks request to place them on the next meeting, the truth is we can just place them on a future agenda. We
Okay.
can't guarantee that it's on the next meeting's agenda because of responsiveness to board issues. Thank you for noting that.
That makes sense. That's all.
Okay, Cynthia?
That was my comment also, because I had requested a presentation from Tom Kelly and regarding the Bright Choice emissions be placed on the CAC May 2022 meeting agenda. And also I had previously made a request relative to the discussion on stipends. So I would presume that both of those come
Yeah,
before.
maybe you missed this bit, but the stipends go before the finance committee, which I did not follow up on because that fell during that bad period for me. But yes, your concerns are heard, and there's little complications with having presentations from not staff and whatnot, but we are working on it, and you can expect to see related items on the agenda in the future.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
No problem. So with that update, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved, Cynthia Landry.
Thank you, Member Landry. Is there a second?
Second, Sutter.
So there's a motion to approve by Member Landry and a second by Member Sutter. Adrian, can you please call a roll call vote?
Yes, before I call the roll, I would just like to recognize Member Souza will be serving as the alternate for Member Pacheco for the Central Region. And with that, I'll take roll. Member Landry. Member,
I'm lowering my hand. Thank you.
No, that's for the vote. Do you vote yes or no?
Yes, I'm sorry.
thank you.
Yeah.
Member Frank is not here. Member Lou.
Yes.
Member Swaminathan.
Yes.
Member Lakshman.
Yes.
Member Talria. Member Pacheco. Oh, excuse me. Member Sutter.
Yes.
Member Sutter. Member Souza.
I abstain.
Okay, great, thank you. Member Hernandez.
Yes.
Thank you. Member Lutz.
Yes.
Vice Chair Mutzenberg.
Yes.
And Chair Eldridge.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you so much. And I'm going to get back to the correct agenda here. So the next item is the CAC Chair Report. So to let you know what happened at the last meeting, the renewables procurement item did pass, and the board took our recommendation regarding the legislative update, including switching the support position to one of watch for a bill that will actually be included in tonight's legislative update again. There are some really cool things that happened, some of which we'll cover in tonight's meeting. But to be really just directly responsive to the request for conversation around the community innovation grants. The budget does include a suggested 3-year commitment to the community innovation grants with some pretty direct asks of the CAC to look at how we select and administer those grants and looking at some ongoing support. This has been part of a greater conversation. It's really exciting to see the board being responsive to what the CAC positions, and also for staff to really hear the concern and the willingness for members of the CAC to be engaged on an ongoing basis. So I ask each of you to think some folks want to be more engaged and some folks don't want any commitments outside of the monthly meetings, and both of those positions are absolutely okay. We do not want to put any additional work on someone who's like, what I can do is show up. But if you are interested in being involved, reach out over the next month, or at least be prepared to come to the next meeting with at least the raising your hand if you would be interested in doing something like taking a look at the community innovation grants or some other area that you would be excited about. So I do want to let folks know that William will be at the next board meeting as opposed to myself. I will be absent to do some family celebrations. I'm currently on the East Coast, so it's quite late. And there are some items on the board's agenda that we are not discussing tonight. And I did want to let folks know that they should be looking at the board agenda. If you wish to make a comment on something on the board agenda, since we are not taking a position on those items, you are welcome to show up and make a comment as yourself. Not on behalf of the CAC, but as yourself. If you want to show up and make a comment on something that the CAC has taken a position on, please contact myself, Vice Chair Mutzenberg, and the clerk, because we need to talk through it a little bit. It can be a tiny bit more complicated. And I guess the only other thing that I want to put in here is that Member Frank gave some comments that that maybe I can share at the end of the meeting. So she gave comments tonight on many of our agenda items, but also around a couple other things that she's looking at putting into future agendas, or at least looking at staff addressing some pretty direct concerns of herself and what's happening in the community. So I suppose that would be it for the chair report. Was there any written comments received on this item, or any members of the public with their hand raised who would like to ask questions?
There are no raised hands or written comments for the CAC chair report.
Great. Seeing no members of the committee with their hands raised, we're going to go into the legislative update. So you guys, it's 6:25. We would like this legislative update to last. We asked for a 5-minute presentation and 15 minutes for question and answer. Really, this is being brought back quite specifically because an item that we requested be moved from support to watch is now being recommended to move from watch to support. And so I just wanted to get an update on this. There's only, I think, 4 items. Is that correct, Alec?
3 items, 3 bills for recommended
3
position.
bills. Yeah, so we're going to run through those. I will give Jane's feedback on that after this presentation.
Great, thank you. Name's Alec Ward. I'm Associate Policy Manager at EBCE. I was here in front of you all last month discussing bill recommendations we're putting in front of the board. We're back today with 3 more recommendations. So next slide, please. The new recommendations are for AB 2765, SB 1020, and AB 2070. Next slide, please. Reminder of the overall legislative timeline and process. Right now, currently, bills are working their way through approps committees. If they make it through approps, then they move to the floor of the House. If they then pass the floor, then they move into the second House. So the takeaway is, again, overall, the bills are changing very rapidly, and some will not move forward, being halted at various steps of this process. Next slide, please. So out of the 3 bills that we're asking you all to take positions, or we're going to ask the board this week to take positions on, you've seen 2 of them before. The board voted to watch AB 2765 and support 2070, but we're asking now that since both have been amended, we're recommending new positions, and they've been amended since last time we gave this presentation. SB 1020 was also introduced since our last meeting, so we're recommending a support if amended, which I'll discuss all these 3 in further detail. But I want to start here first with AB 2765 and SB 1020. These really evolve, they're similar in that they involve making our customers' electrical bills more affordable. So I'm going to explain a bit as to why that's so important to us. And then I'm going to move back to this slide to go through the actual details of the bill. So we can go to the next slide, please. At a high level, both of these bills would fund public purpose programs and other programs that provide broad societal benefits with other sources, like the state tax revenue, instead of currently being funded through electrical rates. What's the importance of doing this? It's that electrical rates are rising very quickly in California, and we really need to do everything we can to decrease them so we aren't disincentivizing electrical efforts. That's reason number 1. Number 2 is that it also makes sure that social policy programs are paid for in a more progressive way, focusing really on reducing costs for lower income customers. I'm going to talk about both these 2 points in the oncoming slides. But what we can do here is very substantial. The bills could make a large impact. For example, CARE is currently funded through the PPP, which is funded through electrical rates, and it costs roughly $2.7 billion a year. So this is a lot of money that we're talking about. Next slide, please. Currently, customers that are just above the CARE and FAIR threshold pay just as much on their electrical bills as higher income or any other customers. So they're really the hardest hit, as they have to pay the highest percentage of their income on electrical bills. This regression is exacerbated by the fact that many of these customers live with a higher number of residents in a household, and they often live in more energy inefficient buildings. This happens oftentimes when you're renting, which a lot of these customers are. So these customers have to pay a higher cost of living in the Bay Area. They have to pay higher volumetric electrical usages. And then they also, because of this, have to pay higher electrical bills, and they're receiving no relief. So this leads to more disconnections. This regressive structure is opposed to state taxes, which are a more progressive structure. Next slide, please. Secondly,
I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
Sure.
Are you giving the whole presentation, or are you giving the 5-minute update on the bills that we've requested?
Oh, I'm jumping to the bills right after this. This is
okay,
context
great.
for the bills. Yeah, this
All
is the
right,
last slide for this background. So they're rising quickly. Need to find ways to keep them below the threshold so we don't disincentivize switching to electric. People will be less likely to switch building away from natural gases, and they'll be less likely to buy a car that's using gasoline, switching to an EV if electricity is too expensive. So we need to find a way to relieve this electrical rate pressure. If we can go back to slide 4, Adrian, please. So through both houses, we're seeing movement on making electrical bills more affordable, especially lower and middle income customers. And we want to be a part of it. That's why we're suggesting support on AB 2765 and support if amended on SB 1020. So I'll do SB 2675 really quick. It creates a new taxpayer-funded public purpose program. These new funds will cover costs of CPU PPP, public purpose programs, including energy efficiency and conservation, arrears management, and instead of continuing to rely on customer delivery rates for paying for these programs. The amendment that was made recently is that CARE and FARA, which is CARE is currently in PPP, will remove to be funded through the electrical rate instead of using this new fund. There are strong assurances that moving the funding source from these important programs will not cause any disruptions. The statute states that the fund must be big enough to fully fund all of the PPP programs, and statute also mandates that the CPUC must consider the continuity of PPP programs and minimize any disruptions. So we see that as very strong and comforting language. In the chance that the CPUC were to determine that this fund was insufficient, then the funding would be collected through customer delivery charges the exact same way that it's currently done today. So we're asking for support on this bill. SB 1020, this is a three-part bill. We're asking for recommending support if amended. This is an existing law that says, this existing law currently says California must hit 60% renewable generation by 2030 and 100% by 2045. This sets interim targets for meeting this renewable energy goals, 90% by the end of 2035, 95% by 2040. So that's part one. Given our EBC's goal of 100% clean energy by 2030, we expect to exceed these targets and even applaud higher targets for others. Part two would be that state agencies must be 100% clean energy by 2030. We have an amendment here that would be that agencies can meet the obligation through load serving entities like EBCE, but the bill adds on a number of unnecessary and expensive requirements, including that compliance obligation must be separated from other load the entity serves. So we're recommending that the procurement requirements be adjusted so that states can satisfy their 100% clean energy simply by enrolling in EBCE's Renewable 100 product. Part three of this bill is creating the Climate Equity and Trust Fund. This is really the affordability section. The trust fund would support a wide breadth of costs, including transportation, building electrification, clean energy, including DERs, PPP and equity initiatives, as well as wildfires. So just a massive breadth of potential from this trust fund. It would consist of federal funds, state legislative appropriations, GHG reduction funds, noncompliance penalties, and other sources identified by the legislature. So this is still being fully built out. The CPUC would then approve the disbursements of the funds to eligible costs, including disbursements to CCAs such as EBCE. The disbursements could take the form of direct credits to the customers, direct rebates or incentives, or reimbursements of eligible costs incurred by load serving entities like EBCE. We would ask for an amendment here to make sure that there's no competitive disadvantage for CCAs and that eligible costs incurred by load serving entities like CCA may be reimbursed in full. So we're recommending support on both these bills as they align with our legislative principles to accelerate electrification, to promote local development through transportation and building electrification, and to support disadvantaged communities and lower income customers by lowering bills and disconnections. Last bill here, very quickly, suggests moving from neutral. We had supported formally, we're looking for 2070 Howard Cahan to move to a neutral position on this bill. It used to require an electrical corporation to notify a fire protection district at least 24 hours before a power shutoff occurred, or else they'd face a penalty. This language was removed from the bill, unfortunately, so we no longer have a reason to take a position on it. This wouldn't come at any cost. We haven't sent a letter of support to the author's office yet, so it would essentially lead to us simply not sending that letter of support if we move to neutral. And from there, we've actually covered all the remaining bills on the next two slides. And the final slide also hasn't changed. And that is simply just discussing our next steps. But to keep things short, I will end things there and open up for questions.
Thank you. So specifically, I would ask Member Sutter, who brought forth some very real and persuasive questions and concerns with one of the bills that did convince the board to move from that support position to a watch position. If you have follow up on this, or if this is addressing the concerns that you brought forth.
So it, it addresses the concerns. I still don't feel that EBCE should support this, but that's for various reasons. The thing that I would ask is, in your presentation, you specifically give the number of $2.1 billion for CARE and FARA, but CARE and FARA isn't moving. So those costs are not going to go down. I mean, the public purpose cost is still they're going to actually be supporting the CARE and FARA 2.1 billion. And part of me is kind of going, it seems like what you need to provide is the percent or the dollars that are actually going to move out of public purpose, which are the energy efficiency costs. And I think it's at least half, probably about half of that 2 point whatever billion per year. The other thing I would ask that you do as I think about this is it will definitely reduce it. But my point is, by how much? Because even for, EBCE, which is one county plus, a few other cities, we have an electric operating of close to 500,000. PG&E's has got to be more than that. The states has got to be more than that. I just don't know what it is. But you reduce it by $1 billion. It's not 100% clear to me how much of a percent or how much reduction that really is. It definitely will reduce it some, but if it's really going to hit everybody at more than a percent or not even a percent, and you guys may know that, and it may be more than I'm thinking. But I'm disappointed because while there's assurances that there won't be issues with energy efficiency once you move it to a state-run program, I don't believe it. And mainly because I've been working here for 30 years in energy efficiency, and I've seen the ups and downs. The cost to the state is just going to add a cost to the current energy efficiency funds that are going to come out of what an energy efficiency program has available to it. At least that's, I hope I'm wrong, but there's nothing
maybe
you
just
can
want to
do
make
about it at this point, but that's my comments.
Mary, just one comment, and those concerns are really valid. I think one of the reasons we as staff feel I think so strongly about wanting to take a position is this is a leadership bill. This is a Senate leadership climate bill. This is a bill that is going, has been made clear by Senate leadership. This is going to be their primary of emphasis for energy and climate. And so, our concern is that if we are not, at the table as a supporter, there's, reduces our ability to sort of participate in the ongoing process over the coming months to, ensure that, those protections are in place. Right now, as it's structured, if there is a shortfall in tax revenues, it does revert to the current methods of collection. I think, we are absolutely committed to ensuring that those dollars continue to be allocated. So, I think that's one thing. And then the other thing is, I think there's some perspective as a CCA who's not the incumbent administrator of energy efficiency programs, that this may actually create more opportunities for us to have a greater role in the direction of the energy efficiency funds than today, where they tend to be very much investor and utility directed and oriented. But those are just the perspectives. It's not, not disagreeing, because I think your concerns are really valid concerns, and the last thing we want to see is have energy efficiency dollars be diminished.
And Mary, the assurances that I was discussing with 2765 would be that it says in there to appropriate general fund money sufficient to pay for all electric corporation PPP funds, and also that the commission should consider the continuity of the public purpose programs and minimizing any customer disruptions. So we do see that as strong language to really protect, to make sure that something like what you're worried about doesn't happen.
Can I ask a clarifier on that? How come you wouldn't pursue support if amended and then actually try and get the specific language in like we do with other bills? Like I believe that other people may also be dedicated to these things and just not thinking through it. And so doing a support if amended, at least at this point, gives us the opportunity to put forth those concerns and see if we can get that language in.
I don't know, and Alec, maybe I'm missing. I don't know that we have a strong, if our concern at this point is so strong as to suggest an amendment, though. I think if we had a strong view over the amendment, that would make sense. And Alec, maybe I'm.
Yeah,
I'm
just
missing something.
A quick clarification here. Are we talking about 2765? The language that I just quoted was from 2765, which we had previous concerns about. We're not asking for any amendments for that legislation. What we are asking amendments for is the 1020, which is the broader equity trust fund and new goal bill.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that this is something that we feel strongly about. Energy efficiency is something that we feel strongly about. And so if there, what do you think about pursuing an amendment so that that specific language protecting energy efficiency is in there? Like, it's a real concern, and we watch these programs get gutted on a regular basis. So the language in there isn't specific and could result in the issues that Mary has brought up in last meeting and this one. So we have other bills where we say support if amended.
As the two quoted sections I had there, it's very specific to say all PPP funds. That would be making sure that there's enough money in these funds to fund all of them, and also to make sure that there's no disruption in their continuity for all PPP funds. So I'm not sure there'd be a value add for specifying EE. I think that it protects all of them, including EE.
I would agree. The one thing that you might consider if you wanted to do any sort of amend is put a timeline on that. And the reason is I have seen energy efficiency start and stop. And the program start and stop simply because of the CPUC regulatory, the time it takes to get those through is it has been better the past probably 5-6 years, but prior to that, it was a big problem. And so my point is, if there's something in there that says, give them a year in advance or give them 6 months in advance, so the CPUC knows that they have to get this through everybody's bill, because it takes a while to start capturing those dollars. The IOUs have to put it back on the bill. They have to tell people about it. It has to go into their accounting. It's not fast.
Yeah.
So,
I'm gonna jump in because I did something wrong. I should have gone to public comment first. I'm really sorry. And I apologize because that was my error.
I appreciate it, Anna Olivia, for going to me first. I don't really have anything else. I think you've heard, and staff can do what they want. I mean, these are my concerns as an energy efficiency, somebody who's highly involved in it and feel it's very important.
And if I have a moment, can I do a quick response to Mary on her last concern? There's time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a very legitimate concern. And I'm sorry I didn't have this on hand last time I presented the bill. But the way the process works with the budget is it has to be passed by June 15th. So the commission would have sufficient time to see if there was any lacking of funding that came out of that June 15th budget. So that's why we see that the commission would then be able to follow their regular protocols for recovering these funds as it currently is recovered. That should give sufficient time.
All right. So Blair, we are on a time constraint on this one, so I would ask that the comment be kept to 2 minutes. I see your hand is raised. Do you have a comment?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Thank you for the reporting of trying to create a using the future of billing ABC billing through, tax incentives and tax purposes. That's an interesting way to work. That it sounds good. It reminded me and brought up to my mind, that's going in depth into a community and how a community works and functions. And it's with that said that, I just hope that we're keeping in mind that, for like when I first started coming here, 2023 was going to be a watershed year for whatever reason. And I've gone through a lot in the past few years just to figure out what is that watershed reason of 2023. I'm still hoping. I've come up with a bunch of different ideas. I don't know. I'm asking yourselves. I put it out there so you guys can make guesswork at it. I think after 2023, as we head into 2024 and 2025, by that time, I think we really have to be thinking about what this item reminded me of today is that we have to be thinking about just the future of real community involvement in this process. I mean, I know you like, the representational process as a form of community energy functioning, but there can be a real, community involvement into this process that I think, we have to be noticing and aware of and noting and building on. And it's not just grooving business practices. We really have to build a community purpose with this energy for all the good practices you're doing. It's just a part of the future of this program that a good luck to yourselves. And I hope this can be a good reminder for yourselves at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Blair. All right, so we are kind of at time for this item, but I realized there has not been much discussion. I mostly wanted to go back and see where Member Sutter was on this as she had raised the initial concerns. The other positions both seem quite positive, and I don't see any issue with them. Is there further discussion on this, or would somebody like to make a motion?
Can I still ask some questions?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, Alex, thanks for giving us an update on this very important legislative bill update. I have some questions for. I'm trying to find the. For just a minute, I'm trying to find the number of the bill. Alex, if you don't mind, can you share your screen again? I don't want to give the wrong number of the bill.
Yeah, Adrian, I think slide 4 would be where the numbers are located. You can share again.
Thank you so much. Yeah, for the AB 2765, do we know how much tax funded fund are we talking about? I heard some numbers, Mary talking about the 2.5 billion. I don't know if that's talking about SB 1020 or that's a 2765. So I just want to know about the size of the funding. And seems to me this is another way the government subsidize the electricity, and it can make the problem more complicated. I would like to know how much tax we are going to increase for the people.
Gotcha. I appreciate the question. I mean, it would be substantial, but I currently don't offhand have a dollar amount for that.
Okay, I think that's to me that's a very critical piece of information we need to know before we give support. It's although we probably EBCE we may benefit from a bill like this, but it's an increasing unknown amount of tax to all people in California. And I think that I will stop here. That's all I want to know. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks.
Thank you, Member Liu. Member Sutter?
So I will make a motion. I'm going to slant it my way. So anybody who wants to not vote on this can bring up a different amendment, but I'm going to vote that the CAC support staff position for SB 1020 and AB 2070, but do not support AB 2765.
Can I hear a second?
Yeah, I
second
will.
it.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I was trying to say, but go ahead.
Seconded by Member Landry, motion made by Member Sutter, seconded by Member Landry to take a support position on, can you read me the bill numbers? I'm sorry.
To support staff's position, which is SB on SB 1020, support if amended on the AB 2070, it's neutral. So I agree with both of those and support both of those.
Okay, excellent. So can we take a roll call vote, please? Oh, sorry, hold on, we have some discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just want to understand the position of Member Sutter. I think I heard you say earlier that you were not a fan of supporting the 2765 because maybe I didn't understand that. I missed last session. Could you just briefly summarize it for me one more time?
I'm sorry?
I think regarding 2765, you didn't want to take a support position because you were concerned about the program not really coming through.
I'm concerned that energy efficiency, which is one of the public purpose programs that would be covered by this new tax rate, would have start and stop and be underfunded, and it would just have difficulties with start and stop.
So I think I'm hearing you say it's a good idea, but not vetted through enough to make sure that the program wouldn't start and stop from one funding source to another funding source. So it's not perfect yet. You think there needs to be more work done there?
I do, and I think it's going to add costs, which will decrease what I think are the available funds for energy efficiency. I hope I'm proved wrong. I understand what Nick said, that this is where folks are going. I do see it being talked about in many areas. I just don't feel it's a good move. But.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep.
So the motion that we are voting on is to support staff position on SB 1020 and AB 2070, but to remain on a watch or neutral position on 2765.
Yes.
All right. Can you please call a roll call vote? Oh, hold on. We have one more discussion. Member Swan.
Yes, I would like to.
I'm sorry.
I would like to ask staff, if we take this position, what are the implications? Which on AB 2765, if we take the position, how would that impact the work you are trying to advocate?
So could you please repeat the question one more time? I'm sorry, I missed it.
If we do not support, if we take a position for aligned with your recommendation, what's the implication?
If we don't support the 2765?
Right.
Yeah, our large concern here would be going back to that context I presented at the beginning of this slide, that rates are going up too much, that they're aggressive, that they're not equitable, and that we really need to be doing every possible thing we can to lower rates. And this would be moving these costs of programs off of rates into a state fund, which is a progressive form of funding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Swan. All right. Seeing no further discussion, I'm trying to make sure I'm not jumping on this one too. Great. Now can we have a roll call vote?
Great. Thank you very much. Member Landry.
Yes.
Member Frank. Member Liu.
Yes.
Member Swaminathan,
Yes.
Member Lakshman.
Yes.
Member Talria. Member Sutter.
Yes.
Member Souza.
Yes.
Member Hernandez.
Yes.
Member Lutz.
Yes.
Vice Chair Mutzenberg.
Yes.
And Chair Eldridge.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. So now we will move on to and thank you for the timeliness of that, we're gonna try and do even better on this one. So the next not light item is the amendment to rate setting protocol. And we will ask staff for a brief summary of this. I do have comments to read into the record at the end of this presentation.
Good evening, Community Advisory Committee. My name is Kelly Brazovic. I'm the Senior Manager of Account Services and here to give you a brief overview of the amendment that we're requesting be made to the rate setting protocol. This will be an action item at tomorrow's board meeting. It's currently on consent. So some background here, and I will respect your request to keep things brief here. In short, our rate setting protocol today states that annually EBCE will hold public meetings to collect public comments regarding our rate setting. Rate setting with regards specifically to the value proposition, where the value proposition is the savings that EBC offers compared to PG&E. And so we've done this so far 3 times in 2019, 2020, and 2021. In 2019 and 2021, when there were no changes proposed to the value proposition, we saw very little support or very little involvement from the community. In 2020, when we were proposing a change, you may remember that was the Brilliant 100 proposed sunset, as well as the Bright Choice discount change from 1.5% to 1%. We did see considerable attendance at both our webinars and written comments. And so we would like to maintain that part of the protocol. However, moving forward, what we propose is that in a year where there is no change to the value proposition, that staff would not have the requirement to make a formal public comment period with a public webinar just stating, "Hi, public, we're not making any changes to the value proposition. Do you have anything to say?" As shown during this meeting, as well as other public meetings, we do offer a variety of means for our community to participate, such as in the public comments that you see at the beginning of the meetings, as well as on each agenda item. We've also, based on some feedback at the Marketing and Regulatory Subcommittee, we also discussed potentially using that same time of year to host some other sort of topical webinars. So sort of keeping an annual cadence of regular public engagement outside of all the other things that we do, but just to also sort of have folks be used to getting those sorts of meeting updates from us. So that's all we're proposing. As you'll see in the next meeting, the next agenda item, this doesn't affect us this year because we are looking at some potential changes to our value proposition, but it's something we'd like to change going forward.
Thank you very much. Let's see, do we have any written comment that was received prior to 5 p.m. yesterday, or any members of the public with their hands raised?
We have not received public comment for this item, and we do not have hands raised for this item.
Excellent. Then I'm going to take the opportunity to read Member Frank's comments into the record. And to give us a little bit of context, Jane said that there's been quite a bit of chatter recently on Nextdoor and really quite a bit of frustration in the community, both in those kind of neighborhood platforms, but also in conversations that she's been having with frustration around EBCE's rates. And she is hoping to receive some guidance around how to respond. I think that many of us have been hearing those things, and we could all use a little bit of support around that. She's also expressing that she doesn't understand, that the public doesn't understand the separation between PGE and EBCE's portion. And it says that inside of here, one of the recommendations is to remove the community workshop if there's no change in the value proposition. And we set this agent, I'm reading her words. So we set this agency up to have a more responsive agency as a community and to have that at our disposal. We want to use these community meetings, as imperfect as they may be, that they are one of the tools that people understand for giving feedback and getting answers to questions. Maybe these community meetings could be taken and used as a way to really engage in some useful dialogue around rates in the community right now. We are heading into a time of volatility in energy markets, and that isn't going to change anytime soon. We would hate to see one of the mechanisms for dialogue and community engagement and feedback to be taken away. So that is Jane Frank's comments. Jim, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, two sort of observations on this is, and one is, I spent about a half hour earlier this morning talking to an EBCE customer representative trying to get an explanation of my utility bill, these very exact sorts of questions. And for one, I'd like to report that the EBCE customer rep at the call center was very patient and very knowledgeable and answered pretty much all my questions, except that they don't have the details on how PG&E's rates are set. And so they couldn't explain what the various parts inside PG&E's the rate setting and the various sums there, what they all meant and how they were based and things like that. And he offered me to connect me to PG&E, and I went through a bit of robocall nightmare and never actually ended up speaking to a person. So I still don't understand how PG&E sets all those different components. So that's one. So I think I support Member Franch's idea to keep the workshops, as imperfect as they are, to help people understand the rates. And so that's one. My second one is a broader concern. And Kelly, you've mentioned, and I've heard Nick mention several times, that the value proposition of EBCE is relative, our rates relative to PG&E's, when I think that that's not the value proposition. It's a minimum requirement or a necessary requirement that EBCE rates be better than PG&E's. But the value proposition is the local control of sourcing our electricity and the ability to use that for local development benefits. So those are, I don't like the use of value proposition limited to just being cheaper than PG&E. I expect PG&E to keep getting in trouble and keep doing crazy things. And hopefully one day we'll be able to eliminate PG&E and do the transmission and distribution as a public service somehow. So then the value proposition totally goes away. So those are my two concerns.
Thank you, Member Litz. Member Sutter?
So I'm going to take a different position from what I heard from Jane and Jim, what you were supporting. And the reason being is I think that there needs to be communication with people, but this is a particular policy. And this policy specifically is around rate setting protocol, and the fact that that happens once a year. Where EBCE directors actually decide what they're going to do. And this is communication specifically around that. I don't think there's any good reason to spend staff time and effort when there is no change. I do feel that, you know, the issues with rates and the uncertainty around them and the fact that things are going up and nobody knows what's going on, it's a communication thing, but it's not specific to this particular policy. So I support staff in this particular effort.
Awesome. Jim, is your hand still up or did you raise it again?
I forgot to lower it.
Okay, great. Cynthia?
Yes, I concur with the comments of Member Lutz and Jane. And I don't want to limit any form of public discussion on this item. I know it's limited to rate setting, but however, I think there's other ideas that may come out of this. So I'm not for this because I don't want to limit any public discussion in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Landry. I don't see other comments, so I guess I'd like to put mine in here. There was more than one thing in this proposal, and one of them is the addition of online access for folks, and I think that that is really important. So I'd like to support the part where online like virtual meetings like we're having now, that is a regular part of community engagement. It's something that we had pushed for pretty hard prior to COVID, and we were told it couldn't happen. And now it can happen because we got a Brown Act amendment. But there are two other pieces, and one of them is dropping from 3 meetings to 2 meetings, and for when there is a change. And for folks who weren't here back then, the reason that we said there would be 3 community meetings is because we wanted to have one in each part of Alameda County, so that when we can have in-person meetings, that folks have the opportunity to go in person if they're more comfortable, or if for whatever reason they prefer to have in-person meetings, and actually go and meet someone and get a better understanding of what's happening. With the addition of Tracy and Stockton, I would be really sad to see those in-person meetings go when we are making changes, because I think it's dangerous to leave folks out. Like this whole community control thing that Jim was talking about, that is the real value to a lot of folks. And so I would not only like to see that not happen, but I think that we might actually have to look at 4 in-person meetings. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't have virtual meetings, but like we need to have opportunities when it is safe for people to be able to engage. And so I guess that's my input. Cynthia, your hand's still up. I think if it's cool, should lower it. If not, we'll come back to you. Member Liu?
Yes, actually, I agree with Member Sutter. I feel that based on the history and for the number of participants for the meeting in the year where no rate change is going to be made. There's a low attendance rate, and I think I think we should. I would support this amendment. Thanks.
All right, so I'm hearing two things. One is, okay, so there is some debate around whether or not we want to have a requirement for public meetings when there isn't a change in the value proposition. I would say that people's rates are still changing, so but there is debate there. Is there, so I'd like to kind of separate that one out. Is there a motion around the dropping it to 2 meetings and keeping the virtual meetings or something along those lines? If we can get consensus on that part, maybe we can tackle the other part in a minute. Am I allowed to make a motion here? Or, okay, Member Sutter?
I motion that the CAC support the idea of 2 meetings and the online portion of it. I think that was the 2 things that you talked about.
So you are in favor of dropping it from 3 to 2 meetings?
I am in favor of dropping it from 3 to 2 and online when you need it. My point, that's the second point, that you wanted to take these separately. I don't think this needs to occur. So.
Oh,
yes.
You don't think it needs to occur? Okay.
No, I don't think it needs to occur in years when we have no change to the value proposition.
Okay. So Member Landry, do you have a comment?
I do support the webinar style meeting, and I do support 3 meetings because it would be throughout, Alameda County be another region instead of 2 regions. But I am reticent to not have the discussion. I always think it's good to have a public forum, and and I mean, it isn't as if we didn't get any comments. I know we didn't get a lot of comments, but I'm reticent to limit community input.
Thank you, Member. Thank you, Member Landry. Member Swaminathan?
Yes. So are we trying to modify this public outreach format to include communication of the broader rate setting? Is that what we are seeking here? Is there another forum where that happens annually?
That is an excellent clarification. Mary, I see you shaking your head.
I actually thought that we were just talking about EBCE staff's recommended change to a single policy.
Yes, that is correct.
Not putting or talking about other policies. So I'm just supporting this particular policy that's in place.
Right. So Mary, I think my clarifying question to staff is there other venues where annually staff explains the rate process or the components of the rates to the public?
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you. So actually the next item on your agenda is our budget for our next fiscal year. And typically that is when rate setting is discussed. If there's any proposed changes or recommendations, that's when that will be discussed. And that usually historically has been at the May and the June board meetings. So that does come up twice in other public forums, both here at the CAC and then also at the board meeting. And then as far as general conversations with our customers to explain who EBC is, what we do, we regularly, lately we've been able to be at some public events. We've been at things like the Roots game and at community events throughout the area. Used to be more, and we're going out to the communities more and more these days, as well as online in various opportunities. You may recall earlier this year when we had some communities that were changing their default product from Bright Choice or Brilliant 100 to Renewable 100. We regularly hosted webinars, and always inherent in those webinars is some background on EBCE and who we are with respect to PG&E. We'll usually show customers a little bit about the bill and where they can find our information on the bill. So we're always trying to educate on EBC as a whole every time we're interacting with the community in either those public, sort of outreach kind of fun events, as well as in our regular sort of educational webinars.
Thank you. So with that clarification, I support Member Sutter's position that we go with the staff's recommendation on part number 1 and 2.
All right, so just to get clarification on what our staff just said. So you're saying that the public engagement opportunities that people have is at the board meetings, which do you do special outreach like you would do for a community meeting to let people know that what's on the agenda is the budget and that includes rate setting? Or is it just notified like a regular meeting, like noticed as a regular meeting?
We have been adding additional, sort of social media components when we are having public meetings. I've seen those advertisements myself. So the community is aware when we do have those meetings. And if customers sign up for our various listservs, they'll get those agendas emailed to them as well.
I'm super sorry. I guess I didn't ask my question very well. So for me, as a person who really fought for these community meetings, the big difference between a community meeting and a board meeting is that with a community meeting, we spend an amount of time actively doing outreach into communities that we don't normally see at board meetings, and really work to say, hey guys, we're talking about this thing that affects your bill. We want your input. We're hosting a meeting in the community where the idea is dialogue and discussion, as opposed to a board meeting where you might be able to show up and if you're lucky, get a whole 3 minutes, but probably at the board meeting, it's going to be 1 or 2. At the CAC, you'll probably get 3. That's a really different dynamic. And so I haven't seen the advertisements, so I don't know whether they're like, hey guys, at this month's board meeting, we're going to be talking about the budget and your rates. Or if it's just like, hey, we're having a board meeting and you should come. So I'm seeking clarification so I understand that a little bit better.
Okay. Yeah, so the rate setting meetings that we have held in the past, that we have held in the past, have had very similar outreach that we do to today's other public meetings, right? So there's an email that goes out to describe the last year's the webinars. And so we're doing sort of the same thing that we do today for the public meetings. I'm not doing it much by the way of additional advertising for that.
Oh, that is disappointing for me to learn. Okay, but thank you for answering my question. Member Hernandez.
Good evening. Thank you very much for your recommendation thoughts as I try to get on camera. There we go. In regards to the interest of time, I understand that business wants to be efficient and public wants to be transparent. And there's a conflict between both sides in some cases, but knowing more about the public sides, be better to over communicate, meet them where they're at. And sometimes it does feel inefficient to get 2 comments, but depends on the quality of those comments that might give more insights to what is the value proposition. So I would be not supportive of staff, because I think at this point you want to be more efficient, but you might miss something in that efficiency. And given that we're a public agency, or at least we're here on the committee, it's important to be transparent and give those opportunities as many as possible. to have communication within the public and the agency and bring those insights forward. And they might feel like you can do something else, but I think those opportunities are important. And given my experience as a public elected official, I think hearing more is better than less. Thank you.
Okay, we do have a motion on the table and a second. Mary?
Well, hearing what we're doing now, we had split the recommendation, and we were going to vote on the first one and not the second. Given where we are and given what we still have to talk about today, I don't know if I can do this, but I can rescind my motion and just do a straight up and down on what they have here and what staff has here, and then we can see support or not.
Yes, absolutely, and I will also summarize the conversation that's happening here. I feel like I do a good job of that, and make sure that these perspectives are presented. So if you would like to change your motion, then we'll just check with the second and make sure that that is a friendly change, because we are at 7:22.
Okay, so I'm going to change my motion to support staff recommendation in all areas, because previously I'd split it. I'm going to just say suggest, and now we'll be able to do up or down. Everybody can decide for themselves.
Great. So staff's recommendation again is to drop from 3 to 2 public meetings when there is a change in value proposition, to not have the public meetings when there, the public meetings, because it's just the board meetings. When there is no change to the value proposition, and to add the webinar or the virtual meeting component. So that would be accepting all 3 of those staff recommendations without splitting them apart. Okay, great. Member Swaminathan, is that a friendly amendment?
Yes, I would second the motion.
Great. So what we're doing right now is to see if there is support or not for that, and then I'll summarize these things. So can we call a roll call vote?
Great, thank you. And just to reiterate, Member Sutter is the primary, and Member Swaminathan is the second.
That is correct.
Great, thank you. Member Landry.
No.
Member Franks.
She,
Member Liu.
Yes.
Member Swaminathan.
Yes.
Member Lakshman.
Yes, I support.
Member Taria. Member Sutter.
Yes.
Member Souza.
Yes.
Member Hernandez.
No.
Member Lutz.
Although I like the webinar idea, I'm going to vote no on the whole thing.
Okay. Vice Chair Mutzenberg.
Yes.
And Member Eldridge. Chair Eldridge.
no.
Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yeses, and 1, 2, 3, 4 noes. Motion passes.
Okay, excellent. And then I will summarize the conversation around that. And Adrian, if I could get the members' positions on each of those, I will include it in the write-up for the board.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for that discussion. That was robust as always. And we will move on to our next agenda item, which is the budget. We had budgeted 1 hour for this discussion. We have 35 minutes left of this meeting. Figure out if you want to go over on this or not. We'll ask who is presenting this item. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All right.
So just worth noting, this is not going to be the last opportunity. This is an informational item for the board on Wednesday. So let me ask a question, actually. Do you want should we go through the full presentation, or is there a preference to focus on specific areas like, say, local development?
This is an informational item. It would be great if you could focus on local development as well as equity impacts and the slide that shows the thing where you're talking about public health and asthma.
Cool. All right. I think I'll run through it. I'll really make sure that we set aside a good amount of time for the local developments. Okay, Adrian, please, next slide. Okay, I think this is actually an important comment to make because it speaks to, I think, the public comments or the comment that Member Franch made, and just general sort of perspectives. I think that we're all hearing about everything is costing more. Electricity bills are going up. Cost of fuel for your vehicle. This is certainly a trend that we're all seeing here at EBC as well. One of the consequences in our particular case of underlying prices being higher is a downward pressure on the PCIA. And the result of that is, in the short run at least, more headroom for East Bay Community Energy to be able to improve our value proposition and make investments in the community. So next slide, please. Okay. Let's go to the next slide just to give sort of the. We are forecasting, inclusive of these base case assumptions, a surplus of $230 million. The base case here is improving our value proposition from 1% to 3%. So that'd be increasing the discount for all customers who are on Bright Choice. It would be reducing the Renewable 100 premium from 1 penny to 0.75. And applying a one-time $50 bill credit for all customers who are on Care and Fair. Hold on 1 second here. We have a little. My apologies. We are, continuing to forecast a 2% uncollectible rate. It's slightly down from the past, but still elevated. In addition to the improvements in our value proposition for our customers, we are also proposing to increase in the near term renewable energy procurement for Bright Choice for 2022 and 2023. We are in addition to that, proposing to increase our local development expenditures by 150% from around 8 million to just under 22 million. We have some funds set aside for the capital improvements we want to make in our office building. And then finally, a $15 million public health grant that I'll go into in a little bit more detail. Next slide, please. Okay, yep, great. So after making these improvements to our value proposition and investing in local development to the tune of around $50 to $60 million of incremental benefits that we're giving back to our customers at the beginning of the year, we are still forecasting a very considerable surplus at the end of the year. But because there's a lot of uncertainty about where we actually land, we are recommending that instead of dropping our rates really significantly right now, we are proposing to wait until the middle of the year during our mid-year budget update to see how things actually operationalize, how prices form, how revenues actually come in, and then to allocate those surpluses generally in the ways described in the slide. So first and foremost, we want to continue to build on our reserves and continue to ensure the long-term financial stability of the agency. So that means putting some money into incremental working capital and continuing to seed our reserve accounts. And then to allocate roughly $100 million, 50-50 between an investment in a fund to support buying one or more new renewable energy projects that we might not otherwise be able to afford, and passing back $50 million in a one-time bill credit at the end of this coming fiscal year to all customers. Next slide, please. Okay, so these results are under the current conditions. There's a lot of risk, upwards and downwards. So I think that's just really important to note that prices could drop significantly, and the PCIA could shoot up. Prices could also be much higher than expected, and we can find ourselves really stressed from a working capital perspective. Next slide, please. So this is an example of the sort of the range of outcomes. Base case is what I've described. P5 is the 5% probability in the low end. So this is a poor performance. This is the low end of what performance looks like, which would be $69 million in surplus. And then on the other side, it's P95. So that is our very, very best likely outcome, which is a $286 million surplus. But then you look at the stress scenario, which cannot be minimized, and it is one where we actually lose $135 million over the course of the next fiscal year. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Let's skip through these ones. So I've sort of given, go back. Yeah, this slide, next slide, please. So one of the questions that actually has come up in a number of meetings is comparing our rates to other CCAs. So one of the things I wanted to highlight is, while East Bay Community Energy has consistently delivered a discount to our customers, so last, I guess, 1.5 years, so it would have been 1%, and now we're proposing 3%. That contrasts to other CCAs who have had to raise their rates. So in the case of the MCE, for instance, while they are offering their customers a 12% discount currently, in 2021, their rates were 18% higher, and in 2020, their rates were 3% higher. So that's just, I think, most importantly, an illustration of our real focus on trying to maintain a stable discount over time. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And I'm going to just cycle through these things quickly. If there's any thing that folks want to highlight, I'm happy to jump through. Next slide, please. Next slide. Let's just go right to local development. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on overhead at the time, just in consideration of time. So next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Yes, okay, let's stop here. Go back. So I do want to highlight, in addition to local development, in addition to the renewable energy purchase, in addition to the discount, we are proposing a one-time, what we're calling a public health grant. So when we formed East Bay Community Energy in 2017, and through the JPA process before that, one of the goals of the agency has always been to make investments in our communities to address, to mitigate and address the harms of air pollution and climate change. A big area of focus in local development historically has been in mitigation. That means reducing pollution through electrification of transportation, through replacing natural gas generation with batteries and renewable energy. But there's another side of that, which is adaptation. Pardon me. And that is, how do we make investments in our community to address the harms that have been done, particularly by local air pollution? And so with that in mind, we are recommending a one-time grant of $15 million. Next slide, please. One-time grant of $15 million to partner with Children's Hospital Oakland to establish a a world-class pediatric asthma center at Children's Hospital Oakland to serve the region. So Alameda County, we see 18% of our children suffering from asthma, 33% higher than the statewide average. That's particularly high in the 880 and 580 corridors. And in West Oakland, 1 in 2 cases of pediatric asthma is directly attributable to high levels of air pollution. We can do something about it. And so the opportunity is to partner with Oakland Children's to establish the East Bay Community Energy Pediatric Asthma Center. Next slide, please. So this program will have a couple parts to it. One is to establish an endowed professorship that would bring in a physician researcher and a team to deeply connect with pulmonology clinics across the region to pursue research and develop new solutions and new approaches for care, both inpatient and outpatient, for the children and families that are suffering most from pediatric asthma. The services, these funds would also go to establish the center itself. The center would provide patients with holistic care from physicians to nurses, social workers, and mental health care providers to really provide a 360 quality of care for families throughout the East Bay and throughout the state, frankly, who are already serviced by Oakland Children's. Next slide, please. Okay. So the $15 million that we're proposing would be allocated over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. The initial funds would actually go towards funding the distinguished professor, who would be someone that would be recruited and start work soon. And then the next tranche of funds would be granted over multiple years as the capital campaign and the build out of the center that would be funding and would be our namesake is constructed. So in terms of the next steps, what we're proposing is that the East Bay Community Energy Board votes to allocate these funds as part of the budget. And then East Bay Community Energy staff engage with Children's Oakland to develop a grant agreement. That grant agreement will be brought forward to the CAC and the East Bay Community Energy Board for approval at some point later in the year. Okay, next slide, please. So now on to local development. So as I said, this year we are proposing a very significant increase in local development funding. I think these stats sort of illustrate that the total budget previously, was in the 6 million, 6 million, and 8 million, and now we're jumping up to just under 21 million. I'm sorry, I misspoke. I said 22, but just under $21 million allocated across 5 areas, 5 significant areas. Next slide, please. So the first area of emphasis is transportation electrification. And the reason why this is such an area of emphasis is transportation pollution represents both the single largest source of air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions in our community. Transportation, the opportunity to electrify transportation is the opportunity to deliver meaningful change to the lives of those most impacted by pollution, while also investing in critical infrastructure that's going to create good local jobs as well. Next slide, please. So in this general area, we have a couple areas of emphasis. So one is to continue our equitable public fast charging hubs program. This is a program that we've started with our first major hub that's being built at the City Center West Oakland garage. And the intent with these dollars is to seed a phase 1 of this program where we're going to seek to build at least 10 of these fast charging hubs located in high density neighborhoods with high densities of multifamily housing where there are currently not other public charging options available. The next area of emphasis is medium and heavy duty charging stations. So if we're going to electrify all those diesel trucks that operate in and around the port and are driving back and forth between logistics centers in Tracy and San Leandro and Fremont and the port, we need to start investing in the charging infrastructure to support those vehicles. And then the last part of our infrastructure program is working with our cities to support their efforts to electrify their fleets. So in addition to these capital programs, we are also allocating incremental dollars to continue to help fleet operators understand the opportunity and give them the resources and tools to pursue electrification. Next slide, please. So charging infrastructure is just part of the equation. Helping consumers and drivers and small business owners adopt vehicles is critical as well. So to that end, we are proposing to allocate $2 million to help lower costs and improve the experience to accelerate EV adoption with a particular emphasis on low and moderate income consumers. We want to establish a $2 million program to support electrification of drayage. Drayage is a type of trucking, shorter distances where drayage trucks typically pick up containers at the port and drive 20, 30, 50, 70 miles to logistics centers. And they're going up and down 580 and 880 corridors constantly. And so we want to use these funds to help many of the small business owners, individual truckers, might own 2-3 trucks, transition from diesel to all electric. And then we want to establish a first of its kind $2 million program to invest in micromobility and e-mobility solutions. So these are things like electric bikes and electric scooters. And so that is a program that we are intending to start exploring how we can partner with our cities and regional planning entities like MTC to invest in. Next slide, please. Community resilience is an ongoing program that we're continuing to fund. And this is where we are seeking to build solar and storage on municipal facilities like fire stations and community centers to create community resilience with clean backup power so that during a public safety power shutoff or other event that may disable the grid, these critical facilities are powered and can become places where the community can go and seek support and help, knowing that the lights are going to be on. Next slide, please. Energy efficiency, kind of as stated in our last, is a major area of emphasis for us. We are in the process of working with the California Public Utilities Commission to finalize a program that we would be hopefully are able to launch this coming year that would provide us $13.5 million to administer state energy efficiency program funds. But this is, I'll note, these are dollars that are not counted in our local development budget because these are not funds coming from directly from us. These are funds that we're administering on behalf of the state. Next slide, please. Now, and then next is building electrification. So part of this is continuing to work with Block Power to fund the commitment that we've already made and put some funds aside to help expand the program as we hope to see it successful. Another major area of emphasis for us in building electrification is clean cooking. There's been an increasing amount of research has shown that one of the major sources of indoor air pollution is cooking with natural gas. And these problems are particularly acute in homes with poor ventilation, crowded kitchens. And so we feel like education and providing resources and discounts actually on induction cooktops is an important part about both creating awareness around building electrification, because cooking is something that we all engage with. And, frankly, we think about a heck of a lot more than just our commodity electricity service, but also creates an opportunity to have a really meaningful impact in improving local air quality. Included here is also $500,000 to support the build out of a clean cooking demonstration center at our headquarters in Oakland. And then finally, we're setting aside a $2 million investment fund to partner with our local governments to support their efforts to electrify their buildings and their facilities. So these are dollars that will go to help cities deploy heat pumps where they might have otherwise put in a new gas boiler. Next slide, please. And so finally, certainly not, last but not least is, our community grants. So this is a $2.25 million commitment over 3 years to provide grants to community-based organizations working across our 4 strategic local development areas: transportation, building, community resilience, and energy efficiency. And these are to support program enrollment, workforce development, and education awareness efforts across these 4 areas. This is a program that we are hoping we're able to partner with the CAC to design and administer for years to come. And I think that might be it. Adrian, do you want to just confirm that that's the last slide? I believe it is. Yep, there you go. All right, that was a mouthful, but I hope I was able to cover everything that folks wanted me to cover.
Thank you. That was really helpful. All right, so I'm going to go first to public comment. Audrey, we will start with you.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. It's great. All of the things you detailed in the local development area, but I wanted to make a comment or a suggestion about the value proposition. I wonder if it's possible not to consider improving the value proposition for a renewable 100. I somehow think that people who have opted for this choice really are willing to pay more, and I think they should if they're higher income. So I just wanted to suggest that maybe you not do it, try to improve the value proposition for Bright Choice. But, and if you think it's unwise, maybe staff can come up with some way to make it optional for people who want to pay less. Maybe that's unrealistic. But anyway, I think that trying to improve the value proposition for Renewable 100 is unnecessary. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would like to now go to Jessica Tovar.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, great.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Jessica Tovar with East Bay Clean Power Alliance. I do have a question. Well, first, I want to acknowledge that I'm glad to see that there's like a community, I guess you're calling it community grants line item. And I want some clarity on that because it looks, I mean, 2.25 million, that's great, but it sounds like you're saying this will be $750,000 per year for the next 3 years. And I want clarity if that's correct. And one of the things I want to emphasize is this should be a program that happens every year. And I acknowledge that the pandemic was obviously a unique situation. So I want some clarity on that. Is that 750,000 per year? And then I appreciate that the board, that the community advisory committee would be working to inform how that program would roll out as well, as they did back in 2019. I do have other questions. I kind of feel like this local development business plan report was kind of rushed, but I did also want to acknowledge under community resilience, I guess that's the microgrid program that was started a while back. it would be good to get like a bigger picture of that program funding, I guess. And then another idea would be to acquire matching funds and really raise that amount towards resilience that's very much needed and really I think should be front and center. And then I think, yeah, I also wanted some clarity on some of the savings on the bill that we kind of didn't go over today, but it seems like it's helpful for the community to know how much in dollar amount they're saving per month or per year by average. And the way it was in the slideshow, I think is really confusing to people. So clarity around that. And, you know, I have to acknowledge $15 million towards the Children's Hospital and the professor. While that, you know, you described it as adaptation, we really should be emphasizing that much amount of money towards prevention of asthma triggers and asthma related to environmental impacts. That's my time, but I do have a lot more questions and comments on the budget. Thank you.
Jessica, can you email those questions to myself and Adrian and Vice Chair Luxembourg, and we'll make sure to distribute those to everyone, yes. And we'll make sure the board gets them as well. Thank you. Blair Beekman.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. It was very nice to hear Audrey and Jessica Tovar speak tonight. I just wanted to quickly offer that the chairperson's microphone, when she's speaking tonight, it's speaking through some sort of wind tunnel or wave tunnel, and it sounds, it's echoing and echoing and echoing. I thought I would note it at this time. Maybe she can do something to help it, and I thought maybe it'd help the meeting along. Sorry for the bother. Thank you.
Is that happening for everyone?
Yes.
So I'm seeing some yeses and some no's. Let me try something. Better? JP is saying yes. Mary, do you hear me? Okay. I do wish somebody had said that to me earlier. I am so sorry that was happening. I don't understand why. Something is odd with my headphones apparently. All right, seeing no further public comment, I will go to our panelists. I do want to read Jane's comments into the record. So the budget is showing a large net surplus position. Staff is recommending a couple things. One of them is regarding public health and asthma. And asthma rates in our community, particularly where correlated to fossil fuel combustion, air pollution is a critical and important issue, but she is not sure EBC is the right agency to be directing dollars towards public health initiatives or to facilitate public health initiatives. It is a worthy cause, but we should be focusing on our core mission as an agency to transition as quickly as possible to local clean energy through investment in community infrastructure and generation capacity, which will also have a greater return on investment on the dollars since it is within the core competencies and functions of the agency. And in our conversation around this item, she just really wanted to stress that it's a very worthy cause, but we should be focusing on the things that are causing the air pollution in order to make this transition as quickly as possible. And that is Member Frank's comment. So we'll go first to Member Sutter. And remember that this is an informational item, not an action item. So any feedback towards staff here is welcome.
Great, thank you. And Nick, thanks for going through that really quickly in the time. I'm going to support the 3% reduction.
I can't actually hear you.
Pardon? Can everybody else can hear me? I think Olivia.
I can now. I can now. Apologies. Go for it.
Okay. Okay, so I support the 3% reduction. The other thing I would say is, Audrey, I'm pretty sure that there are entire communities that are not on Bright Choice anymore. They are on the higher rate. So I think it probably makes sense to have that reduction as well. I think Hayward and I think Pleasanton both kind of upped their entire community to the renewables. The question I had for Nick on the asthma one, I'm not real clear yet whether or not I think it's a good thing, but the one thing that I couldn't figure out is, how long does that 15 million last? I mean, in the sense that, is it an endowment that would then maintain this EBCE kind of effort for 15 years, 20 years? It's a one-time type of thing, or I would worry about putting something forward and then having it go away. And so I just don't know enough about endowments to understand that one.
Yeah, great question. So the professorship is a 5-year endowment. And so you have the endowed professorship of 5 or 7 years. And then the center itself is built and, I don't know, 20, 30 years, at some point in time, I think that kind of infrastructure, you tend to recycle through it every 30 to 50 years. You need to build new facilities.
I had 2 small questions for you on the particular bill items. One is on slide 17, and slide 17 has, and I'm looking for it now, the other professional services. And the only reason I bring it up is it was a huge jump for human resources consulting from 100,000 to $1 million. And I mean, I definitely feel that type of work, you have to, that money can go towards helping staff and improving staff, which is, I think, what you said. But I guess, can you give an example of what that particular line item may actually be?
So I would say that is predominantly going to go towards things like working with staffing agencies.
I'm sorry?
Professional staffing. So right now we have a proposed, I think what Jason, we have 20 open positions, more or less, proposed.
That. We currently have
about that. So, yeah. So these funds are going towards things like working with agencies to actually do the recruiting.
Okay. All right. So finding that.
And so we're talking, I think we're finding what we found is, in this particular labor market, it is ever more necessary to retain external experts to help actually source candidates. And, that costs money.
Yeah, no, I understand how those work, and I understand why that jumped.
Yeah. So that's what it is. Yep.
And then the last question I have for you is on slide 18. You have certain line items with budgets on them, and then you have bullet points. And one of the bullet points is called new building expenses, but none of the line items say new building expenses.
Yeah,
so I don't know which that is.
I apologize for that. That's a good catch. Thank you. That we did have a line item for new building expenses that was cut because essentially it gave no additional information. It was basically just utilities related to the new building. So it was just broken out from what we already have. It just was a little bit confusing.
This was one of those items where it was caught after we posted the item.
Yeah.
So we just didn't fix the,
right. Well,
we just didn't update
there is something called small equipment.
Yeah.
And you have a rent and utilities line already, which made sense to me, but I wasn't clear if what you meant by new building expenses, general maintenance, insurance requirements, additional stocking material, is really that small equipment line, or does the small equipment cause for something that there is no bullet point on?
Well, right. So we already carry insurance, so we didn't feel like that was, and that's under operational expenses. And, and then additional stocking materials, that's also under operational expenses. And then, there was some related utilities, and it just, like, we just made a decision that it didn't really add value. And so I'm sorry, I forgot to remove that descriptive bullet point.
That's fine. I understand there's nothing there, but then there's no description for the small equipment is my only point. The
Oh.
200,000 that is
Oh,
small
I see.
equipment.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's like laptops essentially, and
That's what I-
you know.
Those are my
printers.
questions. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much. Member Hernandez?
Good evening. Thank you very much. I will be brief, but I doubt that my responses will be brief, so apologies in advance. In regards to slide 9, I think where we have the revenue expectations, draft budget, $871 million versus the year-to-date estimate, that 548, is that what's expected for that fiscal year? 548 versus 871. It's a huge jump. So I just want to understand it's more about the revenues from the product mix or the types of energy that is being, either that chart that's on that. I'm just wondering if that correlates to that big jump, more profits from the different types of choices. Is that something we
No,
can
the
elevate?
choices themselves don't really change the margin of one rate versus the other is not really the driver. It's just the overall increase in costs of electricity.
But this is revenue, right? Or am I confused around electricity sales? Just overall cost.
What he's referring to is the PC, the margin that increased above expectations between the PCIA and the PG&E rates. Like that margin for 2023 is expected to be extremely large.
So we're saying $895 million of electricity sales versus this year's $551 million. That's $300 million gap. I guess I'm trying to understand that number.
Again, that has to do with the fact that electricity cost, the rates that the PG&E charges, which is we peg to PG&E rates,
yes,
are going up very significantly due to the underlying drivers in energy markets, and so that is what's driving from one year to the next. There's also some very small increases in load. But no, it's really the increases in costs are driving rates up, and we peg to PG&E, so our rates are going up and our costs, frankly, have risen as well too. So if you look at that, like our costs year over year are significantly higher, not as high as PG&E's.
And I think that complements the question about how much value proposition do you offer versus one other agency giving you a 22% discount, but now not being able to do that. You're trying to be consistent because the costs are going up, but you don't sort of want to have all these deductions and adjustments where it's very volatile. Was that really what drove your comment thereafter about the value proposition?
Yeah, I think part of our driving sort of thesis here is one, we don't want to shoot our underlying discount up very high, 10, 12%. Only to next year have to drop it down significantly. One, and then two, we actually don't know that we're going to achieve these results. There's a lot of uncertainty in the underlying results related to the cost of natural gas, how hot things are this summer, wildfires, hydrology, just, and I can enumerate many other factors.
Of course.
And so that's why we're proposing to, in the mid-year process, review where we are, and at that point sort of determine what incremental value proposition benefits should accrue to customers.
And so when you have these stress scenarios, worst case scenario, you don't make any money or you're in negative position, I think that's how it was phrased. That's worst case scenario between the stress. But how do you sort of adjust to the goalpost and maybe that $50 million to Children's Hospital if you don't really meet those expectations or that estimated budget?
I mean, I think that's the case for it's the same thing for local development, right? So, at some point in time, we could wait for all these things. We could say, we're not going to increase our local development budget by $13 million. We could not provide a one-time bill credit to our Care and Fair customers, right? At some point in time, and that may be the right thing to do. Yeah. But I think we have enough confidence in what we're seeing, at least for the next 6 months, to feel that there are certain revenue reductions through bigger discounts and other expenses that we can comfortably cover.
Thank you. And I think my last comment in regards to the question about energy efficiency, I think it's important. I think the asthma aspect of it is you might see there are more disparate incomes of those who are getting asthma. So I think it's a noble effort to invest $50 million to help most likely people of color, Black Indigenous people who might be suffered more from asthma, living near the freeways, getting harmed, impact from the trucks that are emitting the fossil fuels. I think that's important to invest, and then having more efficiency in the buildings nearby, really understanding how those built environments, those areas are being monitored, looking at new standards like WELL certification for the built environment. If you are going to get your own new building, what does that mean to be that LEED and WELL certified, that the air people are breathing is clean and are able to measure that air via sensors that are out there now using reset standards. And so to really understand what is the air that we're breathing, do we need a lot of HVAC, or can we reduce the amount of HVAC usage to reduce the heat islands that are being created by HVAC in the built environment, exhausting, using more gas, or reduce the amount of energy it uses. I think there's a lot of work to be done. And I'm really proud of East Bay Community Energy here when I was on the board, and now on the CAC, and your leadership, Nick, for continuing the efforts. So thank you so much. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Member Hernandez. Member Lutz. Jim, you can unmute yourself and go.
Sorry, I thought I had several questions. One on sort of the concern. I share some of the concerns with funding asthma treatment center. While it's a very, very worthy goal, seems to be somewhat outside what EBCE should be doing, and we might be able to treat the source of the problem more effectively with that 50 million than we could treating the problem with that 50 million. But again, I don't want to say no, stop treating asthma. It's just whether you get more benefit for your dollar in terms of asthma, and short-term versus long-term questions like that. On the energy efficiency and the electric vehicle funds, there were several programs that seemed to be annual, whereas for example, the asthma clinic was a 3-year commitment. And I'm just thinking back to Member Sutter's concerns about programs starting and stopping, and the impact that has on the continuity of the programs, that you really want to, it takes a year or two to ramp them up, and if the funding goes away, nothing actually gets done. Same sort of question on that, on the CPUC funded energy efficiency program. That would have more continuity unless the bill 2765, if I have the number right, causes some glitches in the transition. So I don't know, just a concern that when you start a program that takes a while to ramp up, I think it's important to make sure that there's a length, a duration of the program that it funded, so that you won't shut it down because it doesn't take off quick enough. And I like the community grants in there, and that seems like a good idea, but I noticed there were no innovation grants in that, none of the innovation categories. So just a question on that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess maybe what I would say is, to the degree that you look at a community grant, I'm not sure that there's I'm not sure how one can truly differentiate between a grant to address asthma and the community grants that we have given or we may give. I think if you're supporting one, you should think about supporting both. That would just be my perspective there. I don't think that there's a mission difference associated with that. So that's just a general comment to think about. I think that the idea of a community innovation grant, or a community grant, I think it's a matter of nomenclature. Community innovation grants were a program we offered one year. I think you could call this community innovation grant. You could call it a community grant. I don't know that there's really in our intention much of a differentiation there. In terms of energy efficiency, it is a multi-year program by structure, and that is why we're funding it over multiple years. Whereas in our local development, we are looking at multiple programs. I do think over time, I would not be surprised if with one or more of these programs that we're going to be implementing, we did this with Block Power as an example, that we will be entering into multi-year contracts. So if you'll note, in a building electrification, there is an allocation of $650,000 in this budget. That was from a previous year's agreement. So that was an agreement where we said it's a 2-year funding cycle agreement with Block Power. We're not, say, for drayage truck financing, because we don't have a program yet in mind. We don't have a multi-year funding commitment to point to. I think, perhaps as we go to market and we examine different potential partners there, we may say we want to do a 1, 2, 3, 4-year funding commitment, and that might be $2 million a year for the next 4 years. And that will be something we would bring back for consideration and approval.
Just for my notes, I'm going to get a quick clarification on what you said, Nick, because it's not consistent with what I had understood from staff. The communications that I'd received from Caitlin, Katie, sorry, was it is after 11 out here. Sorry, is that these are. I thought this funding was for community innovation grants, but you're saying that they're not, and that there isn't a difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I think yes and no, but I don't. There's no specific. I don't have a definition for community innovation grants, right? So yes, it could be a community, but there's not a specific. A community innovation grant is this specific thing. I think the intention here with these grants is actually to partner with you, the CAC, to develop a scope and a plan to deliver these grants. And if through that process, the wish of the CAC is to call them community innovation grants, well, certainly that's going to be in scope for that discussion. But so if we want to call them community innovation grants going forward, I think that's going to absolutely be part of what this group is going to talk about.
All right, I'm just trying to clarify the note taking, because I need to pass things along to the board.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And the other thing, I'm not trying to debate here. The other thing that I'm clarifying is that you see the asthma center as a community grant or a community innovation grant as the same thing.
I would say it is a grant to support our community and deal with mitigation and adaptation to pollution and climate change. In the same way, I would see a COVID grant that we gave 2 years ago, or we might give through these community grants going forward.
Thank you for that clarification. Jim, does that, you're in the middle of doing, so does that address your things, or would you like to make a comment on that? Only because your hand's still up.
Not really. It's not really still. Sorry.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Member Liu?
Yes. One question I have is for this $50 million grant. Is that a multi-year grant, or that's 1 year from the next year's budget?
Multi-year grant. It's funded from this year's budget, given the surplus. So we have resources today to earmark for future years, but the funds will be granted over multiple years.
Okay, so
we will not be encumbering a future. So we won't be encumbering next fiscal year with the expense. So we would have a carryover. We put this in one of our carryover funds. So we have a GASB account as an example. You might put the funds in a GASB account, or you might put them just from an accounting perspective. You say these dollars are from this year, then they're going to sort of sit here. And so when we have an invoice in a year and a half, we'll pull it from the funds that have been set aside from this fiscal year.
Okay, I see. I'm a little bit curious about the selection process and the decision-making process. I think this grant for this partnership definitely looks very interesting and with a great purpose. And in the meantime, from what we are doing, we are definitely focusing energy, and there are many probably programs we can sponsor and to make a big impact on energy field like a smart grid and energy modernization and improving efficiency. There are probably many other programs. Just curious, have we considered a little bit more energy related program to give the grant, and what's the decision making process?
Sure. So, let me give the decision-making process, and then we can talk about other programs. So the decision-making process is the East Bay only has one regional center for the provision of these services, right? So it's not like you can say, well, Kaiser has a facility, Sutter Health has a facility. This is the only facility that serves the East, that specifically sort of is directed at and serves that sort of this use case, sort of the pediatric asthma population. And it serves throughout the county, right? You have equal, coverage and partnership with local clinics from Fremont to Albany to the Tri-Valley out even into places like Tracy. So, there are just only so many entities that you can partner with to provide these kinds of services regionally. And so that was, the underlying rationale for sort of the recommendation and the selection. Also, when you're giving a grant of this size, you want to partner with somebody who has the infrastructure to take those funds in and, provide adequate reporting and oversight to ensure that the funds are put to the intended use. So, I think to your second question about sort of energy funds, well, we're putting $22 million into our local development. Much of that is going to energy. And, we're also looking to put money into community grants too, right? So, strictly speaking, one could argue that the only thing we should be doing is lowering rates and buying more energy, because that's strictly speaking, I think, in terms of like what the core business is, and perhaps investing in local electricity projects. But we have long decided at this program that we want to go beyond that. We want to go into transportation. Yes, it's electrified transportation, but that's not sort of our core business. But we do it because of the impact and the benefits that it's going to deliver to our communities. We make grants to community organizations for the same reason. And, that's the rationale for this as well.
Yeah, thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Member Liu. Member Landry?
Thank you. I'd like to say, as a social worker who works with the safety net population in Alameda County, I really support the investment in our children who have been impacted by living near a freeway or the effects of poverty, and who have not had the opportunities, to live in a cleaner environment. And in my mind, this is an attempt to address issues of asthma and historical environmental racism. So I really like this provision. And I think it shows that East Bay Community Energy is a partner in our community as we transition from the effects of fossil fuels to cleaner and energy. And when I say cleaner, I mean renewable energy in the future. And I think overall, Nick, I like this budget. And I think there are some very good aspects to this budget. I think it was well thought out and outside of the box. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Landry. Member Swaminathan.
Yes, hi. Thank you. I like the portfolio of local projects proposed by staff. It covers a large breadth, so I really like it. I had one question on the CPUC funding for energy efficiency. Is that a multi-year funding? Are we likely to get that level of funding in the future years? And if so, what are the programs contemplated?
It's a 3-year funding cycle. So we would have at some point in 2 years or so have to go back. Unfortunately, so initially we wanted to split these funds more or less 50-50 between low income energy efficiency and commercial buildings. And we were doing so under the sort of direction we had received from the DPUC that our low income programs would not be held to the same cost effectiveness standards because they are explicitly seeking to help low income customers. We submitted that application, and that application was unfortunately rejected by the PUC, who said essentially you cannot offer a portfolio, that portfolio focused on low income customers because it does not meet the cost effectiveness criteria. So we had to sort of shift direction a little bit and focus only on commercial customers. That was the only portfolio that was going to meet their cost effectiveness criteria. So it is a 3-year cycle focused on commercial customers. That said, we are actively working to convince the PUC that their parameters are not right and that we should be allowed to direct future funds towards low-income customers.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. In the interest of time, I am going to ask everyone to please email me the comments that you made. I'm going to do my best to summarize them with Vice Chair Mutzenberg so that they can be sent out tomorrow morning to the board so they have time to review them and so that Vice Chair Mutzenberg can read them in a summary, at least during the chair report at the board meeting. I had a couple comments, but Mary Sutter, why don't you go first?
Well, at the time that I talked, I wasn't quite sure if I supported the grant, a large grant to UCSF, Benioff in Oakland, but hearing and thinking about it some, and I thought Cynthia did a really nice job of presenting why this is a positive thing for EVCE. And so I just wanted to go on record saying, I think it's a good thing to do. It's a large amount of money, but it seems like it'll last a long time and really support the local community for many, many years, much more so than what $15 million of energy efficiency would get. So just wanted to go on record on that.
Thank you, Mary. I actually had a quick question for Nick about this, as I have just some questions around it too. So for those of you who know or have worked with Reverend Chambers, he was a former member of the Community Advisory Committee, one of the original members. He is having a transplant in the coming weeks. It actually would have already happened, but got pushed back because he and Michelle both got COVID. He is a reverend in West Oakland, a community really heavily affected by all the levels of pollution that are coming from a variety of sources, from transportation to just all kinds of things. It's kind of an environmental disaster in a lot of those areas. And we have so many adults with life expectancies that are significantly shorter than folks who live in different areas, and real serious issues that some other of our programming efforts could address, like building envelope repairs that are too expensive for any of our smaller community grant programs to address, because it could cost between $8,000 and $40,000 a house to fix those envelope improvements. But those envelope improvements would also address things like the phenomenal amount of lead paint in those areas that lead to children in those areas having lead in their blood systems higher than those of children in Flint, Michigan. So I was really thinking about what Member Lou was saying, and I'm curious about how the selection was made to do something that focus. I mean, I'm not opposed to children's health. I worked for the nurses. We represent the Children's Hospital. I'm all for taking care of kids, obviously, but I'm wondering how that particular thing was selected, as opposed to addressing the same issues, but in a facility that also would treat the adults in our community, or looking at $15 million as a way to address some of the other massive public health effects that are maybe more closely related to electricity and what we actually do.
Yeah, so, I think, again, a big criteria, used, frankly, by myself in sort of thinking through the options was regional impact. While we do have the Alameda County Health System, does not have the same reach throughout the East Bay, so into the Tri-Valley and down to South County that Oakland Children's does. Asthma does typically start in childhood too. So, a lot of these harms start as children and then, persist through continued exposure to pollution, to lead paint, all those factors in Olivia. So absolutely. So those were I think that the two sort of reasons of the rationale for the recommendation. In terms of alternatives, certainly this is, whenever we look at a budget, it's always a question of, trade-offs and options. We do have a program that we're funding to go specifically at the building envelope, the question of the building envelope, or two programs, frankly. We have our partnership with Block Power to deploy significant deep retrofits to homes in a lot of the most impacted communities. We also have an emphasis on cooking electrification, because one of the most pervasive sources of air pollution that impact air quality and cause things like asthma is actually combustion in the home, and that often comes from combustion from cooking. And so working to electrify that use. I think part of the reality, though, is when we think about deploying funds, when you're going home by home, trying to retrofit or install clean cooking or install a tighter envelope, that takes a long time. And so, when you think about funding it, it's just going to take time to go and incrementally build and build. And so we have those initiatives, and I think we've demonstrated a willingness and to scale those programs as we see those opportunities. And so we have those programs, and I would expect us to continue to scale them over time. This is a one-time opportunity from my perspective, given sort of our current economic condition, to make a legacy investment in the community, though.
Thank you for the clarification. All right, so it is 11:30. Oh wait, that's just for me. It is 8:30. And I feel like I can summarize what's been said here. Again, this is an informational item, correct, staff? Yes?
Yes.
Great. So I, again, am asking folks, please email me your comments so that they can be included in a more thoughtful fashion than as fast as I could type while you were talking. But if you could send those to me this evening, I would really appreciate it so we can try and get it out to the board in the morning. That was a fantastic discussion, and thank you, Nick, for being here and to talk through that with everyone, and everyone for their time. So with that, I will move to the next agenda item, which is member and staff announcements. Jane did request that as Tom Kelly keeps bringing up, and this is also a conversation that is coming up with her neighbors, the issue of the dirty power label. This isn't going away and it hasn't been adequately addressed by staff. We've formed this agency to have a cleaner load profile, and can we please discuss this soon? So yes, we did request that this be agendized, and the last time it was agendized, I think that maybe our intention to very directly discuss this wasn't clear enough to staff, so we will be working with staff to make sure it is on agenda very soon. If not this month, then the following one, ideally this month, but again, we have to look at what is on the agenda. And again, prayers for Reverend Chambers as he is undergoing a really substantial surgery. So if you know him, feel free to reach out. And if anyone is interested in putting together a card or something, let me know. Are there any other members who would like to make announcements? Seeing none.
Jim Lutz here.
Go for it, Jim.
Part of what I said when I applied for the CAC was to support cities and the county actually coordinating their climate action plans with East Bay Community Energy. And starting to talk to sustainability managers or officers in the cities as a sort of a listening, find out how they think it's going and what they would like to see EBCE do differently or more or less. And I'd like to get on the agenda, not for the next meeting. I'm not ready for it then, but put me down for reporting on what the cities and the counties say about their experiences regarding their climate action plans with the EBCE.
Thank you, Jim. Absolutely. And we will take this opportunity to remind folks that if you are interested in a particular topic that you'd really like to delve into farther, to please email me or bring that to the next meeting. Do think about it. And it's really awesome that you have pursued that, Jim. It's just great. All right, seeing no further comments, email me your comments around the budget. And we will adjourn this meeting to Monday, June 13th, 2022 at 6 p.m. and remind you that you can show up to the board meeting on Wednesday to hear their discussion and also to comment on any of the items we did not touch on tonight. Thank you so much and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Adrian, can you please send me the agenda for annotation?
Yes, it has been sent to you.
Oh, you're the best. Thanks.
Great.
Have a great night.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.